Yo, what is going on YouTube? Welcome back to another Carolina Country Boy Classic. In today's video, we're going to be going over the top 5 trophy smallmouth lures. No fluff, just lures. That's it. Stay tuned. So if you know anything about smallmouth, you would know that they are the biggest, the absolute biggest between the seasons of late fall all the way through the spring. So when you go trophy hunting, you need to make sure that you are fishing within these time frames, okay? So also what I'm gonna say is, in this video, all the lures I'm gonna be talking about apply to these seasons, okay? And I've only picked 5, okay? I've sorted through a bunch of them that I think are really good, and I've only picked 5. So make sure you pay attention and make sure you get something out of this, because I promise you, if you use these lures that I talk about, there is a good chance that you will hook into one and maybe land one if you're lucky. So the first thing I want to cover is some sort of finesse approach. Okay, that could be a drop shot. That could be a little 3-inch swim bait like this. The gobius, I love the gobius for, you know, finicky smallmouth. If I'm trying to get them to bite, I throw it on a BFS setup, and it's so fun to get them to bite on that. But when I throw the complete opposite of big, when I go and I downsize, or when I throw something that is sneaky, a lot of times that can trigger some of the biggest bites on your fishery. And especially if you're in the right place. I'm not going to talk about where to throw this stuff. I'm just going to talk about its effectiveness today, okay? So yeah, a finesse approach, you're going to need to have that kind of stuff in your tackle box, because there are so many situations that I've been in where I'm throwing the right lure and the fish are just, one, not active, the timing's off, or something is not right, okay? Because you have to understand, bass do different things during every season. They do different things during the day. So you have to be able to adapt and change your cadence and your presence to the fish. And the only way by doing that a lot of times is by downsizing or just being sneaky about it. So now that we covered the finesse approach, now I want to talk about when the fish are not finicky and when they are biting very well, okay? Now this first or second little lure I'm going to talk about today is specific to fisheries that have a lot of crawfish in them, okay? And if you're very wise and you fish the river, you know that crawfish can exceed, 4 or 5 inches, okay? They can get very, very big, okay? And in certain times of the year, you have times where the fish will get red lips, if you've ever noticed. And that's because they're eating the crawfish that come out of the rocks to spawn, okay? And they get a red little hue on their lips. I call it lipstick. And that's how I know the fish are feeding heavily on crawfish, and I should be throwing red, black, a blood red type color. That's when I'm going to throw that. But when I am throwing that, okay, I want you to understand, this is what I'm going to pick up, okay? It's a football jig. It's got the colors I just described, some green pumpkin in there, some red and black. It mimics a big crawfish, and there's nothing that these smallmouth want more than a big meal, because the protein value in a crawfish versus other forage is superior, okay? They can put a lot of weight on with crawfish, so they're going to actually be more inclined to hit that over something else at certain times of the year, or pre-spawn, sometimes late fall. Once they start really getting inactive, you can get them on a crawfish lure like this. So that's the first lure. All right, guys. So the next lure I'm going to talk about is something that I throw when I'm covering a lot of water and when I want a bigger than average bite. Okay. Now, I know this is kind of an overrated lure, and I know that people talk about it all the time online, and a lot of people throw it. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. And that's a mistake that fishermen think in their heads. They think, if everybody's throwing this lure, I shouldn't throw it. Negative. Okay, every lure has a place and time, okay? Just because everybody throws the same lure doesn't exactly mean that it's a bad lure, okay? Sometimes those anglers that throw the same lure are not throwing it at the right time or not throwing it the correct way. Now, if you can do that right, then the lure will work for you, okay? So the first or second lure I'm going to talk about today is going to be a bladed jig, some sort of bladed jig. Now, this is a green pumpkin jackhammer. And I'm just going to say green pumpkin because it's a very, kind of modest color. You can throw it in pretty much any kind of water, but you really need to adjust your colors to the type of water that you're fishing. Okay, so, and also what kind of forage you're trying to obviously replicate. So if I'm fishing in the early spring, for example, I'm going to throw a red and black chatterbait. You know, there's a lot of those online you can buy. They get a lot of big bites, guys, in the early spring. You know, that is when I primarily throw a jackhammer, is in the spring. I'm not really throwing it in the fall or anything like that. I'm throwing other things. But in the early spring, that's when a jackhammer can be freaking money. Post spawn as well. So the next lure on the list that I want to mention, I want to say that I throw it only in the spring and the fall. Okay. And the reason being is because that is when these lures are most effective. And what those lures are topwaters. Okay. It is absolutely the most important thing to have a topwater on your boat in those times. And the reason I say that is because a topwater can be the most effective lure to cover water and catch like the biggest bass that live in your fishery. I've seen some big bass come on topwaters. Okay. And I don't know what it is about topwaters. I guess it has a huge drawing power. I think, you know, the bigger bass see it as more lively forage, so they hit it better. I don't know what it is, but it's not only a great way to catch some of the biggest bass that live in your river, but it can be some of the funnest times you can have. Sometimes I don't go trophy fishing. Sometimes I just go topwater fishing strictly because I enjoy the thrill of getting those big bites. Okay. The only disclaimer I want to say about, you know, topwaters over what I just mentioned with the jigs is you have treble hooks. Okay. With baits like the jig and the bladed jig, you have a gaff hook. Okay. And a lot of times if you have that gaff hook, it's going to keep those fish pinned, and you can pretty much crank them in like a pencil sharpener. I wouldn't rip them in too hard, but you most certainly have to be very, very careful when you hook a fish with treble hooks, because not only can they jump off, but I mean, they can pull off. They can do all sorts of things with a treble hook. Make sure your hooks are strong. Make sure you're using the right equipment, because if not, all that topwater fishing you're going to do is just going to be a lot of explosions. You're going to feel a couple tugs and you're going to lose that fish. So the lure I'm going to be talking about next is something that I know a lot of people have confidence in. Okay. And that lure is a jerkbait. Okay. A lot of people throw these things. A lot of people have a lot of success with them. This is a given. Okay. I know a lot of people throw jerkbaits, and I've seen some of the biggest bass get hooked on a jerkbait. Early spring, winter, and even late fall, a jerkbait can be money for big smallmouth. Okay. And everybody knows a jerkbait just has an incredible action under the water, and it has the ability to draw in a lot of big fish. Okay. Not only that, but you could be fishing for fish that are suspended with this bait. Okay. It's not just like, you know, something you drag on the bottom or something you just kind of, it's something that you're trying to get those fish that are suspended to bite or commit to, or to come off the bottom and commit to. It is one of those baits that you can catch a lot of numbers with it, but you can also catch some of the biggest smallmouth that live in your rivers. So lastly, I want to give you some honorable mentions that I didn't include in this video, but they are still incredible baits for catching big smallmouth. I just don't think they are as effective as the lures I just talked about in this video. Okay, the first one being a Texas rig, specifically the Ultra Vibe. Okay, the Ultra Vibe can be such an effective bait for catching big fish all year round. I have done it time and time again. Okay, I might have a little bias towards it, and that may be why I catch more fish with it, but I know that it works. I know that if I'm really, really struggling to get a bite, I can throw that. And some of the bites that I've gotten have been really big. So I'm going to cover that one as the first honorable mention. The second honorable mention that I will talk about in the spring is a Senko. Okay, one of the most unbelievable lures that I will only throw in the spring, really, maybe late fall. It is incredible when it is spawning season and the fish are around those beds. You can absolutely put a beat down on some fish with a Senko. Okay, that's just a Gary Yamamoto Senko. If you don't know what that is, go watch a YouTube video about it. So the third honorable mention I want to talk about today is a crankbait, and this is the last one. A crankbait can be absolutely money when you're trying to catch numbers or when you're trying to cover a specific depth of water. Okay, now I like frit-sided crankbaits, you know, crankbaits that don't have as much wobble, because I feel like it really mimics those crawfish skidding on the bottom and running away. Okay, I've gotten some super big bites on those, and I've lost a lot of big fish because obviously when you hook into those fish with crankbait, they can come off, they come up and jump. So I'm just going to throw that in there as well, because I really think a crankbait can be freaking money certain times of the year. So the moment you've all been waiting for, last but not least, I want to talk about something that may surprise some of you, may not surprise you, but that is going to be a 6-inch soft swim bait. Okay, a lot of you already throw this. Some of you don't. If you don't throw this, make sure you start. Make an effort to start, because regardless of the limiting beliefs that you have about the bait being too big or the fish not wanting to hit something that big, you have not experienced a big swim bait bite. Okay, I've had some big bass, like repetitive days where I've caught big bass on big swim baits. Okay, they never get tired of looking at these things. If they're not biting anything else and the water is semi-clear to where they can follow a swim bait, man, it can be some of the best fishing you can do. Okay, and I don't really know what else there is to say about a big swim bait. I mean, big bites, big baits, or other way around. Okay, when I throw a big jig, that's kind of the same mentality. I'm dragging a concrete block on the bottom, trying to get a big crawfish bite, right? So the same thing applies when you're trying to mimic the shad forage, for example. You know, 4 to 6 inch shad are like candy to bass. Okay, and they use it a lot to, you know, get beefed up for the wintertime and for the pre-spawn. Okay, and to get on beds. You have to understand that they don't always, you know, feed on crawfish. Okay, I say that a lot in my videos, but you know, you have other, you know, categories of fish too that are just shad eaters. Okay, so you need to cover all your bases when you fish these lures. All right, guys, to wrap up the video, I want to briefly go over some of the seasonal patterns and migrations of the smallmouth bass that live in your rivers. What are they doing through trophy season, right? Fall through spring. If you stay tuned to the end of the video, you might learn something and where I apply all these lures that I just talked about. Okay, so we'll start with the fall. In the early fall, you have to understand there is a ton of threadfin shad running on top of the water, and these bass are really feeding up on them because they're such an easy forage for them. Okay, it can be some of the best fishing you'll do with topwaters. I've had some really great days out there in the fall fishing a popper. I actually have an entire YouTube video I talked about this if you want to go check it out. Okay, so that's for the early fall. I'm going to be throwing topwaters. Once we have those, you know, colder than average nights, we have, you know, cold nights that really bring that water temperature down, that's when I will start keying in on crawfish lures. And the reason being is because you have something called a crawfish spawn. Those fish will start keying in on more of those crawfish. The crawfish will start coming up on top of the rocks and they will be easily accessible to them. So you also have to think in the mindset of a smallmouth bass during that time. They know the colder seasons are coming. They know they're going to have to go lockjaw for a while. And they also know after the cold season, they have the spring. Okay, and that means they have to develop their egg sacs also. And I also mentioned in this video, if you're fishing crawfish lures, you're trying to get those fish that are trying to build their egg sacs, which are usually females. Okay, so when you're fishing those crawfish lures, you're actually targeting the bigger than average fish. Okay, but they've got to build those egg sacs, and they've got to put on that weight to sustain them through all the way through the winter and all the way through the spring. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you fish in the late fall. It even applies in the early winter time. Once we get to winter time, this is when I'm going to really slow down and I'm really going to try to find where they're at. Okay, a lot of people think that fishing in the winter time is very hard, and it really can be. It's one of the toughest times of the year you can catch, you know, big bass. But I will say this, I've caught my biggest smallmouth ever in the winter time. December in South Carolina, this is when I caught it. And finesse approaches work best. Okay, you want to try to get these fish to bite and just kind of munch on it, right? Like you don't really want to force them to bite. What I'm saying is you want to really hit it with a finesse approach. You don't want to be trying to be Mr. Do-It-All. You really want to be careful because a lot of times you have clear water. You want to find areas with less current. You want to find areas that are deep. You want to find areas that have structure, a conveyor belt, of bait. Okay, that's what you're going to want to find in the wintertime. If you can get all those things right, then you're in a good area to fish in the wintertime with finesse presentations. Okay, moving on into the spring. First, we're going to start with pre-spawn. Those fish start moving out of their wintering holes and they start going towards their staging areas. And those staging areas are directly related to where they're going to spawn. Okay, sometimes you have different waves of fish come through, okay? So in the early spring, those fish really start making a run up the river. They'll actually stop at these big shoal lines, and that's where you'll have to kind of find them. You know, I know a guy that he's hit many shoal lines through the river, and it wasn't until the 7th shoal line and he hit that he found the mother lode of the fish, because they all run together and they all go up the river together. So you have to find them, and that's when you're going to really put a beat down on those fish, okay? Dams are really great because that's the place they have to stop, okay? I'm just going to mention that as well, okay? Now, in the spring, once they get on beds, once they start moving out of the pre-spawn and they start getting on beds more, that is when, you know, your Senkos, your soft plastics are really going to start taking over. Those baits that really piss those fish off on the bed. I like to really do a lot of dead sticking during this time because I know they're going to bite something when I'm dead sticking it, okay? So going into the last part of trophy season, this is when I kind of start wrapping things up. That is the post spawn, okay? Those fish are immediately trying to get on some more protein, some more forage, because they have just spent the last sometimes month and a half laying eggs and being in shallow water, okay? So you're going to try to find the same staging areas that you found in the pre-spawn, and you're going to throw sort of pre-spawn lures, but you're going to throw more shad stuff, okay? You're going to throw your big swim baits, your jerk baits, you know, your flukes, some soft plastics that mimic those things. Those are great times to throw those things during that time of the year. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to cover more of this stuff throughout the year, but I really hope you enjoyed this video. This is some of the stuff that I've been waiting to kind of give to y'all in kind of packs and chunks, but I really want to make kind of a viral video, you know, the kinds of things that I think catch the biggest smallmouth that live in your river. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you want to see more of this content, subscribe. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. Keep it country, keep it Carolina. I'm out.